Layoffs are coming to two Case New Holland plants.
The Fargo plant, which builds tractors and loaders for agricultural and construction industries, were notified earlier this week.
It hit like a thunderclap in the heart of America. Without warning, Case IH shut down $34.5 billion farming industry in the United States. In towns where the roar of assembly lines had long been the soundtrack of daily life, the silence was deafening. Families who have built their lives around these factories suddenly find themselves staring into an uncertain future as job loss ripples through rural communities like a shockwave. But this isn't just a story of layoffs or corporate restructuring. It is a high-stakes decision with deep, far-reaching consequences. This is a huge deal and will have big-time consequences. Stick with us to better understand what's going on. The announcement without warning. Back in November 2024, Case New Holland Industrial, or CNH Industrial, the parent company of Case IH, announced its tentative plans to close its Burlington, Iowa plant. The official statement read that CNH International had tentatively decided to move the production of backhoes, tractor loaders, and rough terrain forklifts out of the Burlington plant to other CNH facilities in the US and Europe. This move would result in the closure of the Burlington site by mid-2026, affecting approximately 350 employees. Similarly, workers in towns like Racine, Wisconsin, and Fargo, North Dakota, were blindsided by the news, leading to widespread confusion, anger, and a profound sense of loss. In Racine, a city with a rich history intertwined with Case IH, the layoffs were particularly devastating. The company, which had been a cornerstone of the local economy for over 175 years, announced in April 2025 that it would lay off over 200 workers, with plans to reduce the workforce to as few as 150 to 170 employees by 2026. This decision came just a year after workers had ended a lengthy strike demanding better wages and working conditions. The abruptness of the layoffs, without the legally required 60-day notice, drew criticism from lawmakers and community leaders alike. So, is this the end of the American farming industry? Well, looks like it. The exodus appears to be snowballing. In Fargo, North Dakota, for instance, the Case New Holland plant faced a similar fate. In March 2025, the company announced plans to lay off nearly 200 hourly workers due to current and anticipated market conditions. This came as a significant blow to the local economy, as the plant was a major employer in the region. The personal impact on factory workers has been profound. Generations of families have built their lives around these jobs, taking pride in producing the iconic red tractors that symbolized American agricultural prowess. The sudden loss of employment not only affects their financial stability, but has also eroded a sense of identity and purpose. The ripple effects extend beyond the factory walls. Farmers who rely heavily on Case IH equipment now find themselves in a precarious position. The sudden shutdown disrupted the supply chain will lead to significant delays in obtaining critical parts and repairs. This will be particularly problematic during planting and harvest seasons, where timing is crucial. Kevin Summer, part of the ownership group with Service Motor Company, notes that we're just seeing extreme difficulties to be able to get parts, get components to be able to keep those machines running. The supply chain issues were not isolated incidents, but part of a broader global problem exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Manufacturing facilities were operating at reduced capacities, and some were shut down due to component shortages. This led to a situation where equipment manufacturers had to make difficult choices between allocating parts for new machinery or for repairing existing equipment. For many farmers, this meant resorting to creative solutions, such as jury-rigging fixes or scavenging parts from old machines to keep their operations running. The decision by Case IH to relocate operations overseas has been met with widespread criticism. Lawmakers, including US Senator Tammy Baldwin, have condemned the move, highlighting the company's record profits and substantial stock buybacks. In a letter to the company's CEO, Baldwin wrote, "Moving production to Mexico, as you are considering, would not only be a slap in the face to the workers who have given so much, It would destroy the institutional knowledge that your workforce has developed over decades of building agricultural equipment. The broader implications of Case IH's decision are significant. The loss of manufacturing jobs in rural America will contribute to economic decline, population loss, and a diminished sense of community. Local businesses suffer from reduced spending, schools face declining enrollments, and the social fabric of these towns begins to fray. Moreover, the agricultural sector faces increased challenges, with farmers struggling to maintain their equipment and operations amidst supply chain disruptions. The lack of prior warning and the subsequent supply chain disruptions have highlighted the vulnerabilities within the agricultural sector and the broader economy. As these communities grapple with the aftermath, questions remain about the future of American manufacturing and the commitment of corporations to the workers and communities that have long supported them. However, the company appears to have made up its mind. Case IH's corporate silence and reaction. Case IH's sudden decision to relocate its manufacturing operations overseas not only blindsided its American workforce, but also sent shockwaves through the small towns and rural communities that had long been intertwined with the company's legacy. More than anything, it is the silence that hurts. The lack of clarity and transparency and the cold rollout of such a seismic shift without forewarning has left thousands scrambling to make sense of a new and grimmer reality. For many of Case IH's workers, especially those in towns like Racine, Wisconsin, and Fargo, North Dakota, being employed by the company was more than just a job. These are people who had spent their lives building the very machines that symbolize American agriculture, the powerful, iconic red tractors and combines that have long been a staple on US farms. In some families, working at Case IH was practically a tradition, handed down through generations. But when the memo arrived, offering no room for discussion, no preparation period, no town halls or Q&A sessions, the feeling was that of betrayal. But it's worse than betrayal. Local economies are not isolated silos. They are interconnected systems where one large employer can serve as the economic engine for an entire region. When a company like Case IH plants roots in a region, whether in the form of a factory, service center, or distribution hub, it does more than just provide jobs. It becomes a force of social stability, educational opportunity, and economic growth. Historically, Case IH and companies like it played a transformative role in shaping America's rural and semi-rural economies. Take the town of Racine, Wisconsin, for example. For decades, the Case IH plant there was more than just an employer. It was a symbol of pride. Generations of families worked there, passing down not only skills and technical know-how, but also a sense of belonging to something greater. Workers knew that what they built, tractors, combines, and balers, helped feed the world. That kind of dignity in work isn't easy to replace. The wages paid by Case IH allowed families to buy homes, send kids to college, and support local businesses, from grocery stores to car dealerships to the corner diner where workers grabbed coffee before their shifts. The ripple effect is well documented. For every manufacturing job created in a town, an estimated 1.6 to 4.6 additional jobs are generated in the local economy, depending on the industry and region. These jobs span across retail, education, healthcare, logistics, and services. A Case IH factory in a town like Fargo or Rhine doesn't just hire engineers and assembly line workers. It indirectly pays the teacher who educates their children, the barista who serves their morning coffee, the mechanic who fixes their trucks, and the librarian who stocks books bought through local taxes. When the core employer leaves, that entire support system is thrown into uncertainty. We've seen similar patterns across American industrial history. Think back to the steel mills in Pittsburgh, the auto plants in Detroit, or the textile factories in the Carolinas. When these giants were booming, the towns thrived. Schools were well funded, infrastructure grew, and cultural events flourished. But as globalization, automation, and cost-cutting measures set in, and companies began chasing lower labor costs abroad, many of these towns experienced what economists call deindustrialization. But for the people living there, it simply meant lost jobs, shuttered storefronts, and the slow hollowing out of the American middle class. Case IH, in its earlier decades, played by the old rulebook: invest in the local community, build long-term relationships, and grow with the people. It offered apprenticeships, supported trade schools, and even sponsored youth sports and agricultural fairs. These weren't just acts of goodwill. They were strategic investments in creating a loyal workforce and a stable operating environment. A community that thrives supports the company that helped build it. However, in the modern economy, many corporations have drifted from this model. The shift toward shareholder primacy, where maximizing short-term profits often takes precedence over long-term social contracts, has redefined corporate behavior. Decisions like relocating operations to Brazil, Germany, or India may make sense on a spreadsheet, but they don't account for the intangible losses: the trust, loyalty, and generational commitment built over decades. Moreover, companies like Case IH don't operate in a vacuum. Their success has always been intertwined with public policy, infrastructure, and American agricultural success. Federal and state governments built the highways their equipment travels on, subsidized the farmers who bought their machines, and funded the schools that trained their engineers. In return, the public expected a degree of responsibility, an unspoken pact that companies wouldn't abandon the communities that made them successful in the first place. You see, Case IH isn't just about tractors. There's still time for companies to reimagine their role in society. Some are beginning to explore new models, such as cooperative ownership, profit sharing, ESG-driven initiatives, and regional reinvestment. But the old story, where one large employer supports not just a payroll, but a way of life, still matters. Case IH once lived that story. Whether it chooses to write a new chapter or close the book entirely remains to be seen. Regarding the decision to move operations to Brazil, Germany, and India, Case IH's leadership offered no press conferences, no sit-downs with workers, and no clear explanations beyond generic statements about strategic realignment and global efficiencies. But one can read between the lines. The company cited current and anticipated economic conditions as reasons for this decision, indicating challenges stemming from both the COVID-19 pandemic and the evolving trade environment, including tariffs. Tariffs are taxes imposed on imported goods, intended to protect domestic industries by making foreign products more expensive. However, in practice, they can lead to unintended consequences. For instance, when tariffs increase the cost of imported components, domestic manufacturers face higher production costs. This can lead to reduced competitiveness, lower profits, and even job losses. A study by the Federal Reserve Board found that the tariffs imposed on Chinese goods in 2018 resulted in a net reduction of 1.4% in manufacturing employment. While some domestic producers benefited from reduced foreign competition, these gains were more than offset by increased costs for manufacturers reliant on imported inputs and by retaliatory tariffs from other countries. The agricultural equipment industry, in which Case IH operates, is particularly sensitive to such trade policies. Tariffs on steel and aluminum, essential materials for manufacturing farm machinery, have increased production costs. Additionally, retaliatory tariffs from other countries have affected US agricultural exports, reducing farmers' incomes and their ability to invest in new equipment. In April 2025, CNH Industrial temporarily halted shipments from its North American and European plants to assess the impact of new tariffs announced by the US government. This move reflects the uncertainty and disruption that sudden changes in trade policy can cause for manufacturers. While the intention behind tariffs is to encourage domestic production, several factors limit their effectiveness. For starters, modern manufacturing relies on complex international supply chains. Disrupting these can lead to inefficiencies and increased costs. Plus, technological advancements mean that many manufacturing processes are now automated, reducing the number of jobs available even if production returns to the US. Lastly, rebuilding manufacturing capabilities domestically requires significant investment in infrastructure, workforce training, and technology, which cannot be achieved quickly or solely through tariffs. The case of Case IH illustrates the complexities of using tariffs as a tool to bolster domestic manufacturing. While well-intentioned, such policies can lead to increased costs, supply chain disruptions, and unintended economic consequences. A more effective approach would involve comprehensive strategies that address the underlying challenges facing the manufacturing sector, including investment in infrastructure, education, and innovation. But what does this mean for farmers? Well, let's find out. The challenge for farmers: competing pressures. For American farmers, especially those in the Midwest and other agricultural strongholds, the sudden changes in Case IH's operational strategy have introduced a whole new level of uncertainty, right at a time when they can least afford it. Farming is already a business of razor-thin margins, where weather, commodity prices, and international trade policies constantly hang in the balance. The latest disruption, stemming from factory relocations and a weakened domestic supply chain, has made an already fragile system even more precarious. At the heart of the issue is timing. Farmers don't have the luxury of waiting weeks for a replacement part or new equipment. When a tractor or combine breaks down in the middle of planting or harvesting, every hour lost can mean crops lost, revenue lost, or even an entire season derailed. In 2024, net farm income in the US dropped to its lowest point in 4 years. This decline was accompanied by a 55% increase in farm bankruptcies, reversing a 4-year downward trend. Midwest crop producers faced significant downturns in corn, soybean, and wheat prices, with expectations that prices would remain at or below the cost of production for the foreseeable future. A survey of approximately 300 farms indicated that typical commercial corn and soybean farms in the upper Midwest were likely to experience financial losses for both 2024 and 2025. These financial challenges have made farmers hesitant to invest in new or used equipment, further impacting their operational efficiency. The agricultural sector has been significantly affected by global supply chain disruptions. Farmers have faced higher costs for essential inputs due to supply shortages and shipping delays. These disruptions have made it challenging for farmers to obtain the necessary equipment and parts promptly. When machinery breaks down during critical periods like planting or harvesting, delays in repairs can lead to substantial crop losses and revenue declines. The relocation of Case IH's manufacturing operations has intensified these issues. Farmers now face longer wait times for equipment and parts, further jeopardizing their productivity and financial stability. Trade policies have introduced additional uncertainties for farmers. The imposition of tariffs, such as a proposed 20% tariff on all imports, has raised concerns about retaliatory measures from key trading partners like China, Mexico, and Canada. These trade tensions threaten to disrupt export markets for US agricultural products, potentially leading to further income losses for farmers. Moreover, delays in passing a new farm bill have created anxiety among farmers who rely on federal support programs for crop insurance and disaster assistance. The uncertainty surrounding these programs complicates financial planning and risk management for farmers. The convergence of financial pressures, supply chain disruptions, and policy uncertainties has created a precarious situation for American farmers. The operational changes by Case IH have added to the challenges, underscoring the need for comprehensive strategies to support the agricultural sector. Addressing these issues will require coordinated efforts to stabilize markets, ensure timely access to equipment and inputs, and provide reliable policy support to safeguard the livelihoods of farmers. This year alone, stories have emerged from North Dakota to Kansas of farmers sidelined for days, even weeks, waiting on crucial components for their Case IH equipment. One farmer in Iowa recounted how a faulty hydraulic pump stalled his harvester in the middle of the corn harvest season, and with the local Case IH dealer unable to source the part from the US, he was quoted a 3-week wait due to backlogged shipping from Brazil. For farmers trying to beat the first frost or navigate narrow harvest windows, this kind of delay isn't just an inconvenience, it's a threat to survival. A recent USDA report noted that nearly 89% of US farms are classified as small farms, earning less than $350,000 annually. And for these operators, even a single missed cycle can have long-term consequences. The financial burden of having to switch brands or invest in newer, more readily supported machinery has also hit smaller farmers hardest. Case IH, once known for its reliability and accessibility, has become a gamble in the eyes of many. But switching to another brand like John Deere or Kubota isn't simple. These machines are costly, often running into 6 figures, and come with their own proprietary ecosystems. A farmer can't just switch brands like changing a cell phone provider. It often requires retraining, adapting entire toolsets, and replacing attachments or parts systems built around their previous equipment. That means tens of thousands of dollars more in expenses, all while commodity prices remain volatile and operating costs continue to rise. In response, some farmers are getting creative. A growing number are resorting to refurbishing older machines and scouring auctions and salvage yards for usable parts. Others are tapping into a new frontier: 3D printing. Online forums and rural makerspaces are buzzing with shared CAD files and DIY tutorials, showing how to replicate common plastic and even metal parts using consumer-grade 3D printers. While this solution isn't viable for every component, especially those involving heavy stress or safety concerns, it's a start. In Nebraska, a cooperative of soybean farmers recently pooled resources to create a small 3D printing workshop, producing minor replacement parts for their legacy Case IH combines. This grassroots innovation points to a larger truth. When corporations abandon communities, those communities don't disappear. They adapt. But adaptation shouldn't be mistaken for resilience without cost. These makeshift solutions are time-consuming, often inadequate, and speak more to necessity than preference. Ultimately, farmers are left navigating an increasingly corporate, globalized economy where their needs are considered last. While companies chase efficiencies overseas, those still tilling the land at home are left to pick up the pieces. Eventually, other layers are going to sweep in. Case IH's competitors capitalizing on the fallout. In the wake of Case IH's abrupt restructuring and its gradual withdrawal from American manufacturing, the vacuum left behind hasn't remained unoccupied for long. Rivals like John Deere, Kubota, and even emerging international brands have swiftly moved to capitalize on the fallout, positioning themselves as more reliable and locally invested alternatives. John Deere, alongside AGCO, CNH Industrial, and Kubota, collectively dominate the US agricultural equipment market with over 60% market share. John Deere's proactive outreach in regions affected by Case IH's restructuring aims to capitalize on this market presence, offering competitive trade-in programs and service packages to farmers seeking reliable equipment sources. John Deere dealerships have intensified their marketing efforts, providing expedited financing options and loyalty bonuses to farmers transitioning from Case IH equipment. These initiatives are designed to address the immediate needs of farmers facing equipment uncertainties due to Case IH's operational changes. Despite these strategic moves, John Deere faces regulatory challenges. In January 2025, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, along with the Attorneys General of Illinois and Minnesota, filed a lawsuit against Deere & Co., alleging monopolistic practices in the farm equipment repair market. The lawsuit claims that Deere restricts access to repair software, compelling farmers to rely on authorized dealers. thereby increasing repair costs and limiting independent repair options. But that's not to say that there aren't other brands as well. Kubota, the Japanese giant historically associated with smaller scale and utility farming, has also expanded its footprint in America's heartland. Known for affordability, user-friendliness, and growing service infrastructure, Kubota has emerged as a pragmatic option for small and mid-sized farms feeling left behind by Case IH's shifting focus. A Tennessee farmer interviewed by a local news outlet shared how, after 22 years of buying Case IH, he switched to Kubota due to shorter wait times on repairs and parts, two issues that had plagued him since Case IH's logistical backbone began to fray. What once would have been an unthinkable break with tradition is now becoming increasingly common. This realignment of brand loyalty reveals an uncomfortable truth about how modern markets function. In a global economy, customer allegiance, no matter how deeply rooted, can only stretch so far when weighed against operational needs. While Case IH relied on decades of goodwill built through community investment, factory presence, and consistent product support, that trust was never invincible. In economics, there's a concept known as switching cost, which is the effort or expense a customer bears when changing suppliers. Historically, Case IH enjoyed high switching costs because of its deeply integrated equipment and parts ecosystem. But once that system began breaking down due to layoffs, part shortages, and overseas relocation, those costs became sunk losses rather than barriers. The shift also serves as a cautionary tale about the limits of legacy in a market that increasingly values agility over tradition. Competitors didn't just seize the opportunity because they offered better products. They moved faster, communicated better, and filled the emotional and logistical void that Case IH left behind. That emotional aspect, something many corporations overlook, is perhaps the most critical. Farmers aren't just buying steel and rubber, they're investing in relationships, dependability, and the peace of mind that comes with knowing help is nearby when a machine breaks down on a Friday evening during peak harvest. By prioritizing foreign labor costs over domestic loyalty, Case IH essentially invited its competitors into homes and communities that had trusted it for generations. The consequence isn't just a shift in market share, it's a slow erosion of a legacy once held with pride. And as more farmers repaint their barns with green or orange logos, it's clear that in today's economy, sentiment alone can't carry a brand. It must be earned and re-earned with every decision. But can Case IH gain something from this restructuring? Let's find out. Potential redemption or final collapse. Case IH now stands at a crucial crossroads. The company's recent operational changes have prompted widespread debate, not only about the future of the brand, but also about the broader question of whether a major corporate player can truly recover once it begins to sever its roots from the communities that built it. Amid this uncertainty, investors and farmers alike are asking, is this a temporary setback on the path to profitability, or the beginning of a long, irreversible decline? The company's financial figures paint a stark picture. In 2024, CNH Industrial reported consolidated revenues of $19.84 billion, reflecting a 20% decline from the previous year. More strikingly, net sales from its industrial activities fell by 23%, coming in at $17.06 billion. Within the agriculture segment, net sales dropped by 23% to $14.01 billion, while adjusted EBIT, or earnings before interest and taxes, declined by 44% to $1.47 billion. The segment's EBIT margin also shrank, falling from 14.5% in 2023 to 10.5% in 2024. To stabilize its operations, CNH has undertaken a series of measures aimed at cost control and efficiency. One major step has been the aggressive reduction of agriculture dealer inventories by over $700 million in the fourth quarter of 2024 alone. This was achieved in part by slashing production hours by 34%, a dramatic move that signals both supply chain recalibration and a reluctance to oversaturate a market that is currently facing declining demand. At face value, these actions might be seen as smart short-term fixes, but the broader implications, such as loss of skilled labor, declining dealer morale, and erosion of customer trust, may prove far more costly in the long run. Much of this turmoil is rooted in external pressures. The global agricultural machinery industry has been hit hard by falling crop prices, rising input costs, and an overall tightening of farmer profit margins. CNH itself pointed to these conditions when it lowered its profit forecasts for 2024. But the issue isn't just about global volatility, it's also about political choices. CNH has openly cited both existing and anticipated economic challenges as motivations behind their restructuring. While the COVID-19 pandemic certainly accounts for the former, many observers believe the latter refers to renewed tariffs and protectionist policies under Donald Trump's second presidential term. These tariffs are expected to affect over $400 million worth of CNH imports from Mexico, Canada, and China. Though such tariffs intend to encourage domestic manufacturing, CNH has instead warned that these costs will likely be passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices, which is an ironic twist that exposes the limitations of blunt trade policies in a deeply globalized economy. There has also been speculation that CNH might consider reshoring or shifting final assembly back to the US if tariff pressures increase. But this is far from a guarantee. Previous examples in American industry, such as General Motors and Caterpillar, show that when multinational corporations restructure in response to economic stress, they rarely return to their previous manufacturing footprints. GM's own post-2008 bailout restructuring resulted in the closure of dozens of plants and a pivot toward overseas production and high-margin vehicles. While GM did regain profitability, it came at the cost of countless US jobs and long-standing relationships with local suppliers. In this light, CNH's current path might similarly achieve financial gains at the expense of the working-class communities that helped build the brand. Public trust, too, may be a harder currency to regain than CNH executives anticipate. Case IH equipment has long been a staple on family-owned farms across the Midwest and Great Plains. For many rural Americans, buying a Case IH tractor wasn't just a purchase, it was a tradition passed down through generations. The company's decision to abandon US production facilities without meaningful engagement or apology has not only upset customers but also triggered lawsuits from farmers, suppliers, and dealers who feel betrayed. This level of backlash suggests that no amount of corporate spin, whether it's framed as global optimization or supply chain diversification, can undo the reputational damage already inflicted. Despite these challenges, there may still be a path to redemption, but only if CNH is willing to make real investments in American jobs, rural infrastructure, and customer relationships. That would mean reversing some of its offshoring decisions, reinvesting in dealer training and parts availability, and publicly acknowledging the toll its actions have taken on farming communities. Anything less could leave the field open to smaller, more agile competitors, especially startups that embrace a farmer-first philosophy and capitalize on the vacuum Case IH is leaving behind. In the end, the question is no longer whether Case IH can survive this moment. It almost certainly can, at least in terms of raw financials. The real issue is whether it can survive in the form that made it beloved in the first place. A proudly American company rooted in the needs, rhythms, and values of the country's agricultural heartland. If it can't reclaim that identity, then this may indeed be less a story of redemption than of slow, avoidable collapse. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now, it's truly unbelievable.